So, right, we'll get that screen time notification on Sundays, whether you're an Android user or an iOS user, and it tells you have averaged blankety blank hours and minutes a day on your phone. And I don't like the way that they do. It's a little bit like shame-based as it slides across your screen. And
do you have TikTok?
I have TikTok, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like when that girl comes on, she's like, I know you've been scrolling. And have you ever got that one?
Oh, no, totally.
It's so good.
And you're like, oh.
I always scroll past it. It makes you feel guilty.
It makes you feel guilty. And honestly, it really doesn't change anything because, like, who has actually seen that and been like, oh, the next week I'm cutting it in half? No, nobody does, right? So whatever, I made the excuse, well, I'm an Instagrammer. I talk to my phone all day long. It's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
My CPA friends are on their laptops.
Yeah.
10 hours a day. You know, like, what's the difference? But then I did the math, and the math is what screwed me. The math literally could have cost me my career because I did the math, and 7 hours and 23 minutes a day is what I was spending on my phone, which equals 49 hours a week. So 2 entire cycles of the sun.
Yeah.
And so immediately I was like, woof, like, that's crazy. 48, which is actually 4 awake days, right? If we're just awake 12 hours a day. Then I kept doing the math, and that was 3 months a year. So 3 months a year. I mean, I may as well just have this thing like plastered on my face, right? 3 months. And then if I live to be 85 years old, I'll spend over 11 years of my life looking at my phone. Now I'm 50. So if you're 30 and listening to this, or 20, just double that, triple that. And that's no way to live. And I just thought to myself, there's no way we were created for this.
Yeah.
And so me being me, I've always been somebody that is just like, I'm just going to give it a shot. I'm going to do it. So initially I was like, hey babe, what if I didn't look at a phone or any screens at all for 2 weeks? And we both thought that was a lot. That would have been a lot. Let's give it a shot. So reached out to Dr. Daniel Amen, neuroscientist in Los Angeles, and said, would you scan my brain before and after? He said, absolutely, but I don't think 2 weeks you're going to see anything. It just needs to be longer. And then so the idea kept growing and growing until I just happened to be in a season of my life where, and really nobody's ever going to be in a season of their life where they can for 2 months not look at a screen. I happen to have this little window that my wife was like, what if you did 2 months and you don't look at a TV, an iPad, an Apple Watch, a laptop, nothing. And I was like, I'm going to go crazy if I move to a cabin. Because initially it was like, let's move to a cabin in the mountains and I'll be Angela Adams and I'll, whatever. Yeah. I was like, no, I'm going to go crazy. So let me find some subcultures in America that maybe aren't as dependent on screens. And so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up living in a Benedictine monastery for 14 days, and then on an Amish sheep farm for 14 days, and then with my family in Nashville for 3 weeks, 21 days. And then I flew back to LA. And so I got my brain scanned before and after. And I had a bunch of cognitive memory testing done to me as well. My father has dementia. And so I am, just big into brain health and trying to figure out kind of what's going on. Does my brain look like it's on its way? All those things. And so that was the idea. I emailed my book agent and I said, I'm going to do this. And away I went.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, I definitely want to get into what were some of those unbelievable revelations that you get to almost, we can vicariously understand a little bit through you doing that. But before I get to it, I got to go to your documentary where you kind of document the process. I really recommend you guys as this starts to get accessible to be able to watch it. But one of the things that did happen is you signed up for it, and then you kind of started having somewhat of anxiousness and okay, what am I doing? Even you did refer to maybe even a panic attack. And I might be getting this wrong, but am I right, Carlos, that you once had a panic attack and spoke on it during worship even?
Yep, absolutely. So we've talked about that. Not a lot of people know that. My very first panic attack ever was leading worship 20 years ago when I was a worship pastor, on stage in front of thousands of people. Room started spinning, had a panic. And then I struggled with panic, not just anxiety, but panic disorder for about a decade. Okay. So I know what it's like. Yeah. I've been free from those for a long time. But then when I did this and I got rid of all the screens and I moved in to this monastery at 23 hours a day of silence, 23 hours a day, Bro, those first 3 days were some of the most traumatic, hardest. I felt like I was going insane. I was having physical manifestations of anxiety. Like even just logging off. There's a scene in the documentary that you saw where I just hit on Instagram, and I sent an Instagram post up, and I was like, all right, I'm leaving for a little bit. Don't know how long. I started feeling anxiousness kind of rising up in me. Are they going to follow me? Are people going to stop caring? All of this identity stuff started peeking out, and I hadn't even gotten to the monastery yet. But sure enough, 3 days in to my experience at the monastery, I had heart palpitations like crazy. So my heart was fluttering. I woke up soaking wet, like I broke a sweat in the middle of the night, like I had the flu. My body was reacting to coming off of this drug. My brain, my serotonin levels, my dopamine levels, this is all stuff I learned after when I found out what was happening to my body. But my body was literally detoxing from this drug. And I almost left. I almost quit. Like I was able to call my wife, and I said, babe, I think I can write a book on 3 days. Like, this is horrible. We need to get off our phones. This is horrible. And she's like, no, like, you can do this. You really can. And day 4, Grant, was the day that it felt like, the only way I can explain it is if you've ever had asthma before, and you have an asthma attack, and you can't breathe, and then you take one hit of the inhaler, and this next breath you take goes from like 20% breath to 100% breath. That's what day 4 felt like. It felt like an elephant stepped off my chest, and I could breathe again. And I was like, oh, wait, this is how we were created to feel. This is how we were created to live. And so, real quickly, the drug that I'm talking about is not your phone. People always refer to this as we're addicted to our phones. Yeah. We're not addicted to our phones. The phone is the needle. The drug is coming through the phone. So this is just the needle. The drug is knowledge. And the drug is control. And that's what we're addicted to. And that's what I lost my grip on. I no longer had control, no longer had knowledge. And yeah, man, it was a rough first few days.
What would you say for the people that feel like I absolutely have to have a phone? It's social suicide. It's like my work suicide. It's success suicide. What would you say to that?
I would say that, again, with my book and the documentary, I am a quote unquote influencer. Like that's how I pay my bills. I'm still on my phone. I use my phone. This book and this documentary isn't about why phones are bad. It's why it's beautiful on the other side of your phone. So what happened is, as I fell in love with a lot of things we're going to talk about, I just started using my phone less and less, but I still have social capital. I still am able to raise millions of dollars for people in need. All of these things are still happening. I still have access to this tool, which is a phone. But I would definitely say that if you're somebody that feels like you need, the word need, your phone, then we got some things to work on. We got a lot of stuff we can work on. And you definitely, every single person listening to this podcast, I don't care who you are, every single one of you will gain more life by having less screen time in your life. Yeah. And my screen time's gotten cut. I'm at 3 hours and 10 minutes a day. I was at 7 hours. So I literally gained more than half of my life back that I was losing. Yeah. And I'm still growing my influence. I'm still making TikToks and doing all the things. So I haven't given up the phone. So I guess I need people to know from Jump Street, this isn't about getting rid of your phone. I said Jump Street. Remember, I was Gen X, early Gen X. But I let them know that, it's why it's beautiful on the other side. And when you start falling back in love with that, and I see it with my kids, I see it with them. I've got a 22-year-old daughter who watched what happened to me and is now she's an evangelist for this kind of life.
Yeah. So let's get into it. I just want to share 2 thoughts. And just one, I think it's so cool that you did it. I was just listening to an episode we did with Dave Clayton, pastor of Ethos Church here in Nashville. And he said a line that I don't think I really caught the first time, but I was re-listening. I was like, wow, that's a big deal. Because he has a flip phone. Yeah. And he's had it for 8 years. Yeah. And man, I don't know how you GPS, set a calendar. I've tried to, he's my neighbor, and I've tried to set a calendar once with him. He's like, absolutely, I want to meet. Let me text you when I get home, because I just don't know. I've got to look at my paper calendar. And just so many things that you need. And he said, one of the reasons why is, he said, we're going to have to figure out, and we're going to one day see after 10 to 15 years what are the implications for our kids when they don't see the front of our face, but they always see the back of our phone?
Yep.
And so I'm just thankful you did push through those first couple days.
Yeah.
Ironically, a mutual friend, John Acuff, I was with him yesterday, and I was in a breakout, and I asked him, what makes you cringe when you see a new author write something?
Right. Yeah.
And it's just a red flag. I was like, his wife was there. I was like, you could tell me too, because maybe he'll be more honest, or you could say what he really says. Like, what does he see? And it makes him just say, this irks me.
Yeah.
And he said, what I don't like is when I see a young author write a book, and it's like, they went to maybe 2 counseling sessions, and now they're writing a book on inner healing, or they just had their first kid, maybe the kid's 3,
parenting.
And they're writing a book on parenting. He said, I just can't stand it. It's like, wait, like, go through the process, go through the ringer.
Yes.
And so you could have, hey, you did 3 days.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. None of us have lived
no
with
one else
monks.
has, right?
No one else has lived with the Amish. None of us even know the Amish or
Right.
the monks. So, but you pushed through, and I'm just thankful. So what would you say is maybe one of the first revelations that comes to mind that you're like, hey, as a young audience, I think you should know this is what I saw and experienced.
Absolutely. And understanding, as a young audience that's listening to this, that my experience would have been way different than say a 22-year-old's experience, because I remember, right? I remember what it was like before. I remember, sleeping for 48 hours in San Francisco outside the Apple store to get the first iPhone. Like we had to camp out in order to get it, right? So like I remember what it was like before that. I had a BlackBerry, right? But the generation that's here now, and that I can't wait to watch lead and is beginning to lead us, would have had a different experience. But I think why it was so good that I did it is now I have verbiage and vocabulary that can hopefully inspire people, young and old. Listen, my mom needs this, who's 72 years old, just as much as my daughter who's 22, to enter into some of these things. And the first thing I'd say is I'll never forget, I walked out, it was like day 2, and I'm in the high desert of Southern California, and I'm sweating, and I walk outside, and I reach my phone because I want to know how hot it was. Mm-hmm. And I remember just thinking, oh, it's just hot. Like I'm not going to know if it's 97.2 degrees with 80% humidity. And there was something in me that needed to know. Like I was like, no, but I want to know how hot it is. Mm-hmm. And I just started thinking, like, why do I need to know that? Why can't I just know that it's hot? Mm-hmm. I've trained myself to need more information than I actually need. Mm-hmm. I've trained myself to actually not wonder anymore. I walk down my little pathway to one of the prayers sessions in the chapel with the monks, and I remember seeing the monks line up, and they're coming 2 by 2 very slowly into the chapel. And I found out that day that they do grand silence from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I was like, I wonder why they have grand silence. And I went to reach for my phone again, and I didn't have it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is 2 times in an hour that I've said that I've started thinking these words, I wonder. And 2 times I've had to actually wonder. Mm-hmm. And it hit me in that moment. We are the first generations walking the face of the earth that are going to lose any and all ability to wonder. Mm-hmm. Like wondering is going extinct. Google is the wonder killer. And I just think as a young leader that's listening to this or something, like that wonder, there may be so much wonder inside of wondering that we've lost. Yeah. If we're thinking, oh, music's starting to sound so lame, oh, books are starting to be so bland, well, maybe because we have access to so much information that we have stopped wondering. So, one of the things that I noticed right away is that humans have lost the ability to wonder. If I'm at a party and I'm sitting with a bunch of friends and we're having dinner, someone says, I wonder, whack, someone within 1 second pulls out their phone and wondering is over. Yeah. And so I think that I want us to get back to wondering again, because for 2 months I didn't know a lot and I had to wonder a lot. And man, the ideas I got out of that were mind blowing.
One of the lines you said is you said we have constant access to get out of our brain. Yeah. Because of social media, because of tech. I think of the endless hours we spend on Netflix. The fact it has to say, "Hey, are you still here?
Yeah,
Like, are you still alive? Are you still awake at least?" Like, but then also we talked about the TikTok girl that comes up like, "I know you, but you've been scrolling." And the fact TikTok's encouraging us to go to sleep.
I know.
But then lastly, I just think about your prayer life and how some of the imagination, wonder, talking to God, they happen in these little moments, the passing to the next thing. And, Netflix and YouTube, you kind of have to commit to watching a show or commit to watching a YouTube, even a 5-minute video. But TikTok's even taken those little smaller crevices of just going to the bathroom or walking to the next meeting or waiting till the next meeting.
Right.
You wouldn't have commit between meeting to meeting to watch maybe a lot of YouTube videos. It's definitely not a show. You don't have the ability. But it's like I could watch a 30-second video. I could watch maybe 4 to 5 30-second videos. So it's robbing even those smaller moments.
Those small moments. And those are the moments that we used to exist in solitude, right? Those are the moments that solitude was something that every human had to do every day. So before the car radio got put in, if you were by yourself traveling from point A to point B, you had to exist in solitude. And it's all but extinct now. So like solitude and wondering, I think, go hand in hand. And like you're talking about, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. I was in my truck before I got out. My mom had sent me a video of someone singing a song about their dad getting old. I watched it. I cried. I emoted in 45 seconds. Like I had this like visceral emotional experience to this song with this girl singing to her dad in a car, showing her dad her new song. And here's the thing. I just need people to understand. I'm still on my phone. I'm still doing these things. Then I filmed myself crying, uploaded it to Instagram, tagged my daughters, and said, listen to this song. This all happened in 2.5 minutes, right? And so I know even now how hard it is to take these 2 and 3 minute chunks out of your day and let them just be. Just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about wonder, one of the coolest moments in the documentary, at least, was you are talking to the camera, like you said, and the Amish kid who's with you in this, it's not a stroller, what is it called?
Lane, a buggy. Yeah, I was in a buggy. I'm in a buggy in this documentary that Grant's talking about.
And the little 5-year-old kid's like, what are you who are you talking
what is
to?
that? Yeah.
What are you like? Why are you talking that way, that direction? Because they don't know that physical box is recording something. What did that make you think of, like how kids are growing up today compared to the kids that live in like an Amish place?
Yeah, so good. So Lane is his name. He became my little best friend. Lane's all Amish. He's all boy. He runs around his dad's horse farm, crawling under the horses. I'm scared to death he's going to get trampled the whole time, and his dad's not even worried. And but this kid is tech free, right? Yeah. He's got his little suspenders on. He's skipping around, and we became buddies. And I asked his dad if I could film for I was filming all of this stuff, not even for a documentary. I was filming it just for myself and maybe some YouTube stuff. I said, can I film the horse and buggy ride? Absolutely. So I'm just talking to myself, and Lane is sitting next to me. And as I'm talking to myself, I'm talking to this box with a lens on it. Yeah. I just remember I could feel him looking like at me and then looking at the camera in my hand and he goes, what's that? And I was like, oh, this kid doesn't know what a camera is. And I said, oh, this is a camera. He's like, but what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm kind of like leaving someone a message. I'm leaving someone a message and then they can listen to it and watch it later. But he still was like so confused. And I just remember, Grant, like having this epiphany later that night. There's Amish here near Nashville in Etheridge, Tennessee, that we would take our kids when they were younger to go visit. They're still there. If you live in Nashville, I'd recommend to go visit them. They're amazing. We'd go visit the Amish in Etheridge, and I used to, when my kids were little, I used to see the Amish kids pulling their little wagons on the road. We'd hit there, and I remember being like, man, those poor kids. Those poor kids, like do they not know what like an Xbox is? Xbox, like PS5, like there's so much good stuff that they could be, but they're just like, they're out here in the middle of nowhere. They don't know anything, and I literally used to think those poor kids. And then when I got to know Lane and just saw how brilliant he was and just how full of life he was and how pure he was, And we would sit in the evenings outside of the farmhouse. And Willis, who was my sheep farming mentor, we'd be sitting there having coffee at 8 p.m. Because the Amish drink coffee 24/7 because they're just so exhausted from farming all day. It doesn't even mess with them. But I remember seeing a minivan come driving by, and it was dark. And in the back of the minivan, you could just see the two glowing screens, and I could see two kids holding up their iPads as they were driving by. And I'll never forget when those kids passed, I had the original thought that I had in Ethridge, Tennessee, but I had it to these kids in the minivan, and I go, oh, those poor kids. And it just switched. And so I just think to myself, as a parent now that has a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, and an 18-year-old, people ask me all the time, I feel like, John Acuff was talking about, don't write a parenting book when you only have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old or whatever. I feel like maybe I've got a little street cred in the parenting world. And when people ask me, what's one piece of parenting advice you'd give, I always say, the only thing I tell you is to wait as long as you possibly can to put a screen in your kid's hands. Yeah. That's it. And so, yeah, man, seeing Lane and how pure he was and how he still was so fascinated by the screens and all of these things. I was like, I don't want to ruin his purity. I don't want to, mess this kid up. But it was very eye-opening with the Amish, especially because the Amish was more, the monks, it was very introspective. The Amish was more, my life was being changed around community and what was happening on the outside of me. But yeah, it was pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah. There's this quote by Albert Einstein I'll share, and then we can go to the second thing was it's so crazy because it's back in the day, but he says technology is a razor in the hand of a 3-year-old.
Wow.
And that was back then that he was saying that's like what technology is.
Yeah.
And so just to your experience and exposure is I think amazing. Seeing it's an instrument, and again, I would say I don't know if it's neutral, and we try to treat it like it's neutral.
What the
just technology.
Oh, sure, yeah,
because at this point it's vying for your soul more than it. We would say, hey, everything is not good or evil. I don't want to say it's evil, but I wouldn't say it's fully neutral.
Sure. And again, I think there's some give and take with this conversation, especially with the phone as a needle in my head. I don't think technology in general, but I do think, I do think that if you think of a needle, it can administer heroin or it can administer life-saving medicine. And depending on who's creating what's going inside the needle, I think that's where it's not neutral. I think that's where we're seeing more and more negative medicine, whatever it is, being injected into society and into who we are. Because the needle's always going to be here. They're not going away. Maybe they will. I'm actually to the point now where I'm starting to think, it's either going to be God himself that does it, or it's happened a few times in the last few months. I feel like entire cell phone towers have been like, nobody with AT&T can talk to anybody or whatever. And it's like blackout or whatever. And I was like, people, you need to go 7 weeks like I did, because I've got the skills now to live if I don't have my screens. And I feel like we may be, listen, I'm not super conspiracy theorist, dude, but it could happen. And what's going to happen if you got to get from Grant's house to Carlos's house and you don't have GPS to tell you, can you get there? So we can get into that in a second.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's go on to the second one. So the second revelation you kind of had when you were either living with the Amish or monks, what would that be? Yeah.
I believe that one of the most shocking things that happened to me was I went from 1,000 miles an hour to 3 miles an hour. And I say 3 miles an hour because that is the average speed that a human being walks. We walk at 3 miles an hour. And when I was with the monks, I was so frustrated as to how slow they were. I mean, how slow they sang. Even their chants, that everything was so slow. And then when I went to Amish church, I was the first non-Amish person to attend their church in 15 years. 15 years. And they invited me in. They let me in. I built trust really quickly with these people. They let me in, and their singing was so slow. Everything was so slow. Meals were so slow. Sermons were so slow. Everything was so freaking slow. And I'm just like, give me more. I need content. Give me stuff I want to learn. And I just thought to myself, we have lost our ability to move at the speed and the pace of life that God created us to move. And listen, people can debate this, you can go back and forth, but one of the things I thought is Jesus did his ministry at 3 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say that Jesus' disciples were on horseback going, I don't know how fast horses run, 30 miles an hour?
Yeah.
No, they walked everywhere they went. They did ministry at 3 miles an hour. And then I look at current church culture and I just laugh because I'm like, there's nothing 3 miles an hour about what is happening. And I looked at my life and I thought, I'm going to have to get back to this, because by the second week at the monastery, bro, I had my hands clasped behind my back. I was walking with it. If they would have put a robe on me, I'd have been a monk. Like, I was living at God speed. And there's just something stable about that. There's a stability that the Benedictine monks have. They vow to obedience, stability, and fidelity. And I think that a lot of that stability comes from they know there's 6 hours of prayers a day, and then they also move at God's speed. And so one of the biggest things I've learned is questions I have to ask myself is, how can I make sure today that I am slowing down to 3 miles an hour? Listen, I'm still on airplanes. I'm still speaking. I just got off book tour. I was in like 27 cities in 34 days, right? Like, I go. But even in those days where I'm like going 1,000 miles an hour, how can I lower the volume of life so the volume of God goes up? How can I start moving at God's speed again? And there are a bunch of things that I've implemented in my life that has helped me do those things and slow down. But yeah, I think that's probably one of my other big revelations, is that we were created to move at 3 miles an hour, and we're no longer moving at 3 miles an hour.
I gotta assume that you also realized you had the capacity to love people more when you went slower.
Bro, people say that we are living in the most divided times ever. Now, I don't agree with that. If you just go with me to the National Public Library, let's walk down the history aisle. Let's open up one book. We're not living in the most divided times ever. There's nobody's getting beheaded in America but what is true is we have more access to other people's opinions than we've ever had before, which makes us feel this division, right? And we're talking about Godspeed, but I also think this is a thing that this has to do with Godspeed, that we weren't created to consume as much as we consume. Yeah. We weren't created to know as much as we know. And because I was able to move at 3 miles an hour, because I was able to have 90-minute meals with Willis and his family, okay? Let me go and tell you right now. The Amish are Amish, and I'm not. We hold very different belief systems. I told my super conservative friends that they are like the least conservative people I know. Like, they're the most liberal Amish people I know. Like, I'm like, don't even come at me with your conservatism. Like, I lived with them. And there's a lot of things that the Amish and I don't agree on. But because we lived at 3 miles an hour, and because our meals were 90 minutes long, Willis and Kathy and I talked about deep-seated beliefs, hot topics, that I wouldn't even talk about on my own podcast, but we're talking about these things, and what does it look like in the Amish community? Why do they believe about this politically, and all these things? Grant, because we had 90-minute meals, we were able to talk about things and disagree vehemently about things while sharing the shared love of food. And nobody can hate somebody for 90 minutes over a meal, because what happens is, like, you disagree on something, and then the conversation goes here, then you go somewhere here, and then next thing you know. And then so I started thinking to myself when I got home, I was like, that's crazy that we were able to have these incredible conversations about things we disagreed on. And not one time did I get like, did my neck start getting red? And did I start? Why was that? Yeah. Well, the average American meal in 1923 was 90 minutes long. The average American meal in 2023 is 12 minutes long. And I think we have lost the ability to sit over time with people and share disagreements. We have to get back to moving at God's speed, even at the table, even, all these things. And so, yes, I think that God's speed allows us the capacity to love people that maybe we normally wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. And you've gotten the privilege, as I have as well, to go to Israel and to do long dinners with Shabbat dinners. One of the most powerful experiences in all of Israel.
Absolutely.
Just being with a Jewish family and doing a Shabbat dinner. But you then also with the Amish. Have there been things, as you keep getting exposed to this and seeing the contrast, that you're like, okay, I come home to my wife and kids like, hey, would y'all be down to try this?
1,000%. We immediately, the first thing I did was that no more screens at the table.
Yeah.
You can have your screens all day, but it's just not at the table.
Yeah.
Willis used to tell me, the farmer, when I would ask him about why the meals are so long, he's like, "This is our Facebook. This is the way. This is our Instagram. This is the way that we update from each other." Because they were never just eating alone with their family. It was always like 4 or 5 families, different families every night. Lunch was the same, breakfast was the same, and so that was awkward, to be honest with you, at the beginning with my family. Like nowhere even near the table. So it's like we're just kind of eating. And then I said, and we're gonna have it. We're gonna eat for 30 minutes, bro. People don't know how to do that. Like people don't know.
It's like you're building a muscle.
You really are.
Wow.
And it was so uncomfortable, and it was so awkward, and there were so many 10-minute segments of time with no one saying anything. My kids were just like, and this was only 2 years ago, right? So I mean, they were like 16, 18, 20, just like wanting to get up. Can I go? I was like, no, what else is going on? We had to learn how to talk to each other again. We had to learn how to not use our phone as the vehicle for conversation. Like, oh, have you seen this video? Like we had to relearn and retrain all of these muscles as a family. And so,
okay, we got to talk about this with the going slow, and the language you're using is going at God's speed.
Yeah.
You went on tour. There was a man who kind of interrupted your situation.
Yeah.
I got to see the video, and I just made a comment that is probably my most liked comment of all time. If you can kind of tell the story, and then I'll kind of add my commentary, and it just seems like you just don't have the capacity to love people well if you're going so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the story of the Good Samaritan.
It really is. And I don't think that the story I'm about to tell would have happened the same way had I not done my 7 weeks and my experiment. I was in St. Louis halfway through my book tour. My book is what we're talking about, Reconnected, 7 screen-free weeks with monks and Amish farmers. And I had, I don't know, maybe 100 people that come to this indie bookstore to listen to me read and then to sign their books and take selfies, right? And people that come to book signings at indie bookstores, I'll go and just lay it out there. It's a certain kind of people, right? Like these are book people, right? And as I'm beginning to read, there's a window behind me, and I could see people were not looking at me. You could just tell when I was like, "What's happening?"
Someone's
and I looked, someone's behind me, and I could tell. I could barely see. It was dark outside. That someone was trying to get in the door because there was a door right there. I was like, "Oh, he could probably just go around. Probably just someone coming to the book signing." And then, sure enough, the individual comes in. And I could just tell that he was maybe intoxicated. He was kind of stumbling a little bit, humming a little bit. And I was like, and we were in a part where maybe there could be some homeless people around. And so I kept kind of going. And then he started talking a little bit and I could tell some of my audience was uncomfortable. And then he literally says, "All eyes on me," and I thought he was about to start rapping Tupac. Or,
Whether you're sure.
I know, I'm literally wearing Tupac, right? And so, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this guy, I don't know what's going to happen right now. And people, when he said that, were really nervous. Within the society that we're living in, with shootings, who knows kind of what's happening? What's he about to do? Yeah. He wants to be the center of attention. So the manager, I could see her. She was almost like starting to pull him, and and then I saw some other staff running to pick up phones, and I was like, they're about to call the cops on this guy. And so immediately I go, "Hey, what's up, man?" And he looks at me. I said, "Come here." And he walks up to me at the front, and now I'm like, well, I'm in. And I was like, "What's your name?" He's like, "Oh, my name's Tarzan, man. What's your name?" I was like, "My name's Carlos." He goes, "Well, what you doing, man?" I was like, "This is my book." I showed him my book, and at this point I'm like fully committed. And I said, he's like, "What's your book about?" I said, it's about connecting with other people, reconnecting. And he said, all right, man. And I said, I'm reading to my audience here, and he's like, well, they're your audience. I'm not your audience. And in that moment, I don't know why, it just came out of me. And I go, oh no, you are my audience because you're here.
Yeah.
And that was I said that the second I said that, this dude put his arms out and he hugged me. He embraced me. And I hugged him for a minute, and then I kind of was like, hey man, here, I'm going to give you a book, we can, help you if you need anything else. So, kind of escorted him out or whatever. And there was just something that happened in that moment that, I feel like right now people are just so desperate for something pure, something that feels good in the news. But then you commented that it was pretty soon after that. And what was exactly your comment? Because I pinned it to the top because it was so right.
That most of Jesus' interactions were actually interruptions.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I noticed, I said, what he seemed like he did well was he would pause and then he would see the person.
Yeah.
And actually see him. Because that's what you did. Like, you're like, I'm going to choose to see him. Everyone's looking anyway.
Yeah.
Let's truly see him and then care for him. Like,
care
treat
for
him.
Yeah.
Give him dignity.
Absolutely. And, and that is what Jesus did. And when you said that, though, I'd not seen it or heard it like that before. Everyone loved it. You're right. I think it's been liked 2,000 times or something on the post. But I just started thinking, wow, that's so powerful. Like, can we start seeing interruptions as invitations, right? Like how can we do this more? Man. Yeah. And as the point of this recording, we're a week away from an election, and I'm just like, man, can we do more of that?
Yeah.
Can we do more, instead of feeling interrupted, can we start, using these moments to let them be invitations into seeing people that actually, he just wanted to be seen. That's why he said, all eyes on me. He wanted people to see him. So we saw him. And guess what? That calmed everything.
Yeah, it definitely changed as I started thinking through and seeing. I mean, most of the New Testament, are people just interrupting his day over and over and over
totally,
again.
yeah.
Like, literally, there's a time where it says people were surrounding him that they almost were crushing him.
Wow.
And it made me just realize as a young leader, you often are trying to find your calling, your gifting, the thing that you're going to do to make a mark on the world, impact the world, usually with all these good and best intentions.
Yeah.
But you're kind of like looking at how to lead and how do I strategically do this? And you realize the founder of our faith and the best leader that ever lived, who's changed generations.
Yeah.
He kind of just woke up and had that capacity of connection with God.
Yeah.
That then gave him the capacity to overflow whenever person after person after person interrupted his day.
Absolutely, man. And it's funny because I do think to myself, when people ask me what I do, and I know I write books and I talk to my phone and I stand on stages or whatever, but I think a big reason why I have the following I do is because, and I'm not going to say I did this because I saw Jesus doing this until you said it on my Instagram, and I was like, wow, I think that's actually though what I love to do. It's a sweet spot where I like to see people that aren't being seen by other people. Yeah, and I feel like people, when they see that, they're like, well, why does that feel like a breath of fresh air? Well, because maybe we were supposed to do that in the first place.
We got to close this out, but I just got it because there's so many things, and God's kind of interweaved our lives in different times. But I feel like, you do have that. I sincerely affirm it. Like it's people, I'm sure, I think I've even said you have a viral anointing, but it is deeper than that. It's that we haven't seen people that respond to the stranger, the other, the people that everyone passes by, like you do. You see something or notice it, you listen to the prompting, and it's those viral moments almost always tied to interruptions. When I think about your stories,
all of them do.
So you're like an interruptive viral anointing, and randomly a bird anointing that you do. It's like when you and birds interact,
I know,
or you and
dude.
interruptions,
That's
which
right.
even those birds are almost always interruptions.
They are. That's good. I like that. No, I like that. That is true.
Last revelation, you talk about Godspeed just now. What would be the last revelation you kind of had?
I think this, again, all of these things, and when you read the book, you'll see that they pile on top of each other. But one of the things that I had to learn to do was to trust my gut again. I just don't think we trust our gut anymore. I think we use Google over our gut. And I feel like God gave us intuition. God gave us, I had to, I was joking just about getting lost when, Farmer Willis would send me to the feed store to go get a tractor part, and then he would just tell me how to get there. And I'm like, well, I don't have GPS. How am I supposed to get there? And I'd get lost. I'd find my way. I think that may be the statement, is that we were created as human beings to get lost and find our way. And we now no longer have the ability to get lost. Like, think about that for a second. We're always going the right way. And I'm like, oh, but were we really supposed to always go the right way?
Yeah.
So whether that be physically on a map, whether that be spiritually speaking, like, dude, I got super lost and had to refine my way back to God while I was at the monastery. Like, I was having some doubts. Suddenly, like, this whole gospel thing became like a fairy tale to me. I'm like, wait a second. Like, really? Jesus, he died and rose again? This sounds crazy. And I'm with a bunch of monks, you know, and having this breakdown, and I had to find my way. I had to get lost. I had to trust that the voice of God still speaks. Yelp reviews, right? Like we I no longer use
that's
Yelp.
Big for me. That would be
about
hard.
This. Think about this. I need you to think about this.
Huge Yelp review.
So this is what Grant is admitting. You're admitting that you trust Bob from South Dakota.
1,000 plus Bobs.
Right. 1,000 plus Bobs from South Dakota and their taste buds over you, like over your gut, over, you know. And so there's things that I've done. I no longer use Yelp. I no longer use GPS. I look up directions before I go. I write them down. I get there. I use my gut. And I'll tell one story that I think was kind of the epitome of this. It was in the documentary. But, you know, we're trying to cut hay. And it's been like 7 days and we're trying to make hay, and I'm a frustrated farmer, right? Like I think I'm a professional 7 days in, and I'm like, Willis, like, we got to cut the hay today. But then it was going to rain, and I knew that you can't cut the hay if it rains because it's going to ruin the hay. Well, Willis was like, because you could see the storm clouds there. Willis was like, there was dew on my boots this morning, so it's not going to rain. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, my daddy always told me if there's dew on your boots, it's not going to rain. So we're going to cut the hay. And I was like, bro, look at the thunderclouds. It's like exploding over there. Like, it's about to hit us. We're going to cut the hay. So I'm like frustrated that we've waited a week. We're going to ruin the hay. Willis, he needs to listen to me. So I go with Kathy and Krista, his wife and his daughter, and we go somewhere, and we're on our way back a few hours later. It's been dumping on us the whole time. We're just miles from the farm. We get about 2.5 miles, 2 miles from the farm, and the rain just stops. Not only stops as in like it had passed through, the streets are wet. No, it is dry. There's not been any rain. We pull in a couple hours later, and Willis is just kind of standing there with his arms crossed in the driveway, just smiling. And I get out, and he goes, there was dew on my boots, you know? And so I'm like, I saw that happen over and over with the Amish. They have to trust their God-given senses for the weather and farming and the sheep and the animals. And we have such access to answers that we no longer trust our gut. Yeah. You know, we trust Google. So I tell people all the time, 90% of your decisions a day, trust your gut. 10% use Google. You want to find information who you're going to vote for? You want to find this guy? Yeah, Google away. But 90% of your day, trust your gut, intuition.
Yeah. Man, can you help us know, like, or anyone's like, okay, I got to get this book, or I really want to watch this documentary when it comes out, or I want to follow more of your journey and your story, because you're amazing at sharing stories, and there's more to come. Yeah. What are ways that they can get plugged in? Yeah,
absolutely. If they Instagram's where I hang out most of the time. And I'm creating more and more content based on my learnings. You know, like I spent 7 weeks without a screen. Like, even one book and one documentary doesn't even scratch the surface of everything that I know could help people. So I've got a lot of stuff coming in 2025. I got a thing called Human School that I'm going to be releasing. That's going to really help people with this whole reconnection thing. And so go to my website, carloswhittaker.com, or hang out with me on Instagram @loswhit.
If you could, it's just like a minute, maybe 90 seconds. You could even look to this camera. Like, what would be your encouragement for that person that almost any time the tech conversation comes up, a little bit of guilt and shame can bubble up, but then you get inspired when you hear like what you're saying as well. Like, anyone, like what next steps could look like, encouragement, how to live in that friction and that tension of the in between. Yeah. So,
if you're listening to this and you're like, I really want to do something like this, but I don't know what it is to do, start small. This is what I say, start small. 30 minutes. I want you to, for 1 week, I want you to find one day where you spend 30 minutes at least, get this is the hardest part, at least 100 feet away from your phone. Okay. 30 minutes, 100 feet away from your phone. That means if you got to go to your next door neighbors, put it there, like whatever it is, put your phone for 30 minutes. Then the next week, I want you to do 90 minutes. Then the next week, I want you to do 3 hours. And what you're going to find is by the time, and I've done this with enough people over the last 2 years, by the time you hit 6 hours, where you can be without your phone or your screen for 6 hours. The goal is to get to 24 hours. So start small. And don't think that you've got to go move in with monks and Amish farmers. I did that for you. But what I want you to do is just to take bite-sized chunks and try to get, your goal is going to be 24 hours straight, 1 day a week, no screens. And I think if we all did that, I think we're going to get a lot of our breath back.